In today's episode, we're delving into the fascinating realm of nocturnal nutrition. So grab yourself a coffee or a midnight snack because it's time to get your shift together.
It's time.
It's time to get your shift together. You're listening to On the Path Podcast
Oh, I like the sound of this.
with your host, Sparv.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening from wherever and whenever you're joining me for episode 5 of On the Path Podcast. Thank you again for joining me. I really appreciate you being here and being a part of this education movement to help educate and inspire shift workers out there lead happier, healthier, and more sustainable lives. Today's another important episode. In the previous 2 episodes, we've touched on exercise on night shift and sleeping on night shift. And today we're going to be talking about eating on night shift. As with the previous 2 episodes, there's a lot of variation when it comes to when we should be eating, okay? There is no specifically when we should be doing any of these things, as it varies person to person. But I just want to kind of impart some knowledge from my personal experiences with people that I've trained, that might help you be happier, healthier, right? It's really tricky on night shift. I know you've heard me say this in the previous episodes, and you already know it because chances are you're working it. It's really tricky. So any little thing I can do to help out, I really hope I can. So let's just take a look at eating as a whole to begin with. This is a pretty broad topic. I'm sure you'll agree with me. There is so much out there on the internet right now, whether it's on social media or wherever it is that you're browsing, about what we should be eating, how we should be, when we should be eating. It's overwhelming, and that's coming from me, and I'm a nutritionist. It's overwhelming. I can't believe the amount of garbage there is out there. There's been so much effort from apparent gurus out there to murky the water to kind of make their product that they're selling seem like the only answer to weight loss or to muscle gain or whatever. And I'm really disheartened by that. When it comes to eating, if you're eating for weight loss, it's a pretty simple equation. It's actually thermodynamics. Kind of can't be argued. A bit like Einstein's rule of gravity, right? What goes up must come down. When it comes to exercise or eating for weight loss, what goes in must be lesser than what is going out. I.e., I need to be exercising, burning more calories than I am consuming. I'm going to say that again. I need to be burning more calories than I am consuming. It's a pretty simple equation, which is frightening when you think about how much is out there about what to do to lose weight in the first place. Keto, paleo, vegan, carnivore. There's so many of them. And I have no doubt that you can lose weight on any one of these diet plans. You could. But why are you losing weight? It isn't because that you're paleo. It isn't because you're vegan. It's because you're in a calorie deficit. The calorie deficit being you're eating less than you're burning. That is a calorie deficit. So all of them. You can't give me one single diet plan out there that isn't essentially at its foundation that. It's simply a calorie deficit. I'm sorry, I get pretty, not worked up, but I'm just so bothered by it. I've been training people for over a decade now, and the biggest problems they have is that they're confused because they're being told something by, maybe it's a celebrity or someone that they've trusted in the past on social media, and they're trying to sell them some absolute garbage about some miraculous weight loss tea. If you're not in a calorie deficit, you're not losing weight. I'm going to do a reaction video later this week from a video I saw from someone who's kind of respectable in the industry. And this video I saw, it was a clip, so I am going to be responding without any context, which is fraught with danger, but whatever. In the video, he literally says if you want to strip fat, you need to have an ice bath every morning. What the fuck? What, are we just completely ignoring the rules of thermodynamics now? That's like saying if you practice jumping enough times, you'll fly. It's not going to fucking happen. Sorry to break it to you. If you have an ice bath every morning, which is phenomenal, there's some really great research out there about how good it is for you. But if you have an ice bath every morning and then you're slamming 15 quarter pounders a day, hot tip, mate, you're not going to be losing any weight, right? Yeah, sure. People that tend to do these sorts of health conscious activities tend to generally lead healthier lives overall anyway, eat healthier, exercise, etc., etc. But this bloke saying that you're going to lose weight from having a fucking ice bath, spare me, bloody hell. What a laugh. But what bothers me is there's going to be people out there that jump on board. That's a shame. So anyway, probably weren't expecting this little rant coming from a shift work kind of perspective when it comes to eating. But we really need to look at eating as a whole. So that is the rule of weight loss. If you want to lose weight, you need to be in a calorie deficit. Yeah, that's it. Calorie deficit equals weight loss. When it comes to eating for muscle gain, putting on a bit of size, you will need to be in a calorie surplus. A calorie surplus being the polar opposite of a calorie deficit, as the title would suggest. Meaning we need to be eating more calories than we're burning. So we need to be burning less calories than we're eating, if you want to flip it around, in order to create that calorie surplus to enable us to put on some muscle. Coinciding with that, we need to be eating more protein as well. A lot of bro science out there has suggested in the past you need to be eating, 3 grams per pound of body weight or even more. I found from my own personal experience, somewhere between 2.2 to 2.5 grams of protein per pound of body weight is a really good range to be in. It's at that point where I'm not drowning in protein. There's only so many protein shakes a man can drink in a day, and steak and all sorts. So anyway, I wanted to really give you just a quick brief overview of eating, dieting, because I think it's important that we explore those, and inevitably the questions will come about weight loss, muscle gain, and that's a really brief overview of the two, really. And I'll explore them more in depth later, but I wanted to touch on them just quickly before we dive into this nocturnal nutrition. There's a couple of hormones that you should understand a little bit about before we start. Ghrelin. Ghrelin, I've always loved the sound of. Ghrelin is the hunger hormone. And it's funny because it kind of sounds like gremlin. And when I'm hungry, I'm like a gremlin, right? And you probably are too. Like that Snickers ad. You're not you when you're hungry. So ghrelin is that. It's the hunger hormone. It tells our stomach that we need to eat. We need food. Get it in my belly. The other hormone is leptin. Leptin is the hormone that tells us we don't really need to eat right now and we need to dial up our exercise, our activity. These two hormones are governed by the circadian rhythm, which we've spoke about in the previous podcast. The circadian rhythm being our internal body clock. This dictates when we need to be feeling alert, when we need to be tired and going to bed, when we should be eating, when we should be moving, all of these things. You can probably already see where I'm coming from right now. When we're active during the evening, our ghrelin and our leptin is kind of freaking the hell out. It doesn't know what's going on. Because it's governed by our internal body clock, it kind of freaks out. So I'm sure some of you, like me, have experimented in a number of different ways to eat during night shift. For me personally, when I first started on night shift, I would, whenever the evening began for me, depending on if I slept or not, if I got up at about 5 or 6 p.m. in the afternoon, I would have breakfast. like my genuine breakfast meal, like I normally would. At some time around 1 a.m., I would have lunch, which would, for me back then, it would probably include chicken and rice or tuna and rice, veggies, something like that. And then at about 6 a.m., 6 a.m., I would have dinner, whatever that would be. For me, normally, again, back then, chicken and rice. I'm a mincemeat junkie, or ground beef for you guys listening abroad. I'd have something like that with some sweet potato, bit of cheese, something like that. And I was fortunate enough not to have too much gastric distress. I didn't feel crook through my guts when I was trying to go to bed. I didn't feel too bad, really. I felt heavy, but it never really affected my sleep. What was a problem, though, was the hours between midnight and 7 a.m. I was so fucking hungry. I was so hungry for the whole time. I was pretty lucky back when I first started being a police officer on the road, doing night shift. I was heavily involved in bodybuilding, though I never stepped on stage. Let's just be clear. I was a massive nerd for it nonetheless. So I was able to rely on my discipline for me not to be reaching to the vending machine. Or the bigger problem on night shift was McDonald's. McDonald's was the only one we had in the station that I was working at back then. I think they had KFC, but they didn't have drive-through. Anyway, so I really relied on my discipline to not snack. But, ghrelin is running wild. That's that hungry gremlin. You know the one I'm talking about. It's running wild all bloody shift on night shift. It's telling you to consume. It doesn't know what's going on because your body clock's flipped. It doesn't know what the hell to do. So others out there might not be as fortunate as I was and able to kind of just ignore those cravings. The longer I got in my career, I definitely have fallen off the wagon and binged on night shift. It's really easy. And there's a huge problem on night shift being that we have access pretty much only to shit food on night shift if we aren't prepared. I mean, think about it. What do you have? You've got servo food, you've got fast food takeaway, you've got vending machines. Really, those are your big three players for night shift. So if you aren't prepared, the chances are you're going to just go and reach for something shit. You don't really have another option. The science out there is pretty limited when it comes to eating on night shift. I was fortunate enough to attend a forum last year held at Flinders University in South Australia, where some incredibly smart people were speaking on specifically issues faced by shift workers. And one of the researchers spoke about eating on night shift, and it was eye-opening for me. I really was totally amazed to hear, one, that someone was even researching us, two, also what she had to say. Essentially, she spoke about fasting a little bit and eating as much as possible during your regular awake hours. So that might be having a meal at 5 p.m. and then maybe one at 8 or 9 p.m., a smaller meal. Some really tiny snacks through the shift. We're talking some nuts, really nothing sugary or sweet, high fat nuts, maybe a hard-boiled egg here or there, but really limiting eating during that night shift completely. You might notice as well on night shift, I'm going to talk about poo, just brace yourself. There really is, your gastric emptying is significantly reduced during night shift. You poo less, which means you're holding more food in your guts, which can then mean you don't sleep well, right? So this idea of fasting as much as possible during the hours in which we're supposed to be asleep can significantly reduce the gastric distress. That's that kind of uncomfortable gut feeling. that you can get. So reducing the amount of food you're eating on shift, really limiting those big, thick, heavy meals, really limiting them or not eating them at all. And then when you get home post night shift, I personally prefer to have a feed before I go to bed. The advice was to not. It was to go to sleep and then eat during those waking hours. It's tricky. It's really tricky because as a first responder, on night shift was typically some of our busiest times. I needed energy to go. Sometimes we'd have a wild job and you'd have a massive adrenaline dump, and that would lead to increased hunger as a response to that adrenaline dump. So there really is no one size fits all, which I'm sorry to keep saying episode after episode after episode. But there really is one no size fits all. The purpose of this episode was to provide you with what's worked for me and some of the advice that I got from the researchers at Flinders Uni. So like I said, for me, when I started my career, I had no issue. I didn't have any gastric distress, but I also was exercising a lot, which I believe helped. I would always, as previously mentioned, go for a walk post night shift, and I was very active on night shift. I wasn't static sitting in a patrol car in the typing room. We were always going job to job to job, which I think probably helped with that digestion. If you're a bit more static on night shift, I think there's chances are you're probably going to suffer a little bit more from that gastric distress. And on the other hand, as the research suggests, perhaps you should try and incorporate some fasting. Think about it just like intermittent fasting, where your eating window is significantly less. You are able to skip a meal. It's not going to kill you, okay? Might feel a little uncomfortable to begin with, but once you've done it a couple of days in a row, you'll work out you can survive pretty well on 2 meals a day, or even less. Eat when you wake up, have another meal within a regular period of time. Probably about 9 p.m. would be the latest recommended eating a heavy meal, okay? And then prioritize snacks during that shift window, low sugar, no sugar preferably, snacks during that shift window. And that should help with sleeping post night shift as well as just not feeling too groggy. Also, it can actually make you feel a little bit more alert. That feeling of hunger during that shift, it can help you feel a little bit alert. Now, I touched briefly just then on no sugar. If there was one bit of advice I would give to everybody, it would be to reduce or remove all added sugars from their diets. It isn't the devil. It is bad, but it isn't the devil. And I'm not going to go on and harp on about how it's the worst thing that you could possibly do to your body is to eat sugar. I mean, some people use drugs. Some people drink excessively. They're pretty bad as well. So pick your bad. And I'm picking to reduce my sugar intake significantly. I suffered from migraines for many, many years, thanks to many, many head injuries. And I found that when I reduced or removed all added sugars, I felt so much better. I really did. I was more alert during the day. I didn't have that 3 p.m. lull where I just felt like a zombie. Reducing sugar was the single greatest health hack that I've ever used. So when it comes to you on night shift, I think that you too should consider removing or reducing all added sugars. Before you even consider dieting, before any of that weird and wonderful stuff that we can do, start with sugar. Sugar's a great place to start. Okay? It's easy to do, just don't eat sugar. And what you'll find as well, once you start reading the back of the packets, you'll start realizing how much added sugar is in everything. So it's going to reduce the pool of the foods that you're eating. In turn, meaning that you're going to be eating more whole foods. I don't like to say healthier foods, but more whole foods is probably going to be a lot more meat, a lot more veg, Yes, there is sugar in fruit. Again, pick your bad. I'll take fruit over a Mars bar. Okay, it's just about balance. It's not saying you can't have sugar. I would be an absolute imposter if I were to sit here and tell you that I don't eat sugar. I totally fell off the sugar wagon a few days ago. I felt like eating cake and watching Rambo, and it happened and it was good. But it's about balance. I can turn it on and I can turn it off. So advice for you when it comes to night shift or just any part of life in general would be to reduce or remove all added sugars from your diet. When it comes to booze on night shift, I've said this in the previous episode, booze can help you go to sleep. Yes. However, the quality of sleep you'll be having is terrible. You pretty much won't have any REM sleep, which is rapid eye movement sleep. You can, if you have a health tracker, be curious to actually look at that. See how you sleep after some booze compared to a night where you're not having booze. So minimize booze on night shift. I know it's hard. I get it, especially in my line of work. I see a lot of people going to the pub post shift to unwind. There's better things you can do. You're in this for the long haul. There's this kind of career that we're doing, it tends to last a while. I've just gone up and just about to hit the 10-year mark now, and there's no signs of me stopping. So this is a long, long journey. You want to maximize your life, and boozing for a week at a time while you're on night shift, that's taken years off your life. I really do believe it's so bad for you. And then it bleeds into the other weeks. Booze is so dangerous in emergency service first responders, for anybody for that matter. So minimize, reduce, don't remove unless you feel like it. But my advice is to minimize and reduce. Caffeine, tricky, right? Tricky. I see more people slamming coffee and energy drinks on night shift than any other shift. And it gives me the heebie-jeebies because I know the damage that they're potentially doing to their sleep. And the damage that a lack of sleep will do to a person. Massive damage. I mentioned it in the previous episode, again, sorry I've referenced this a few times, about minimizing our caffeine intake after about 7 p.m. And I stand by that advice. I don't want to be drinking any caffeine on shift. It has a half-life of about 7 hours, so 4 hours for most of it to be out of your system. If you're slamming a long black or Americano at 3 a.m. and expecting to sleep at 7 a.m., 8 a.m., it's just not going to happen. Or it's going to be really affected sleep. It's going to be broken sleep. I mentioned it a few times now, but we need to prioritize our sleep on night shift. That is the golden rule. If you take nothing else out of the previous 2 episodes in this, it's just to prioritize your sleep. Do what it takes to have a good amount of sleep while you're on night shift. Because a shit sleep, it's going to kill you eventually. Like Matt Walker says, sleep less, live less. He's a guru. He's a doctor. I'm just a PT nutritionist who's a bit obsessed with health and wellness. Listen to him if you don't want to listen to me. So that's what I have to say about eating on night shift. Nothing too profound. Nothing you probably didn't already have a hankling towards. But I believe that there's some really helpful, handy tips in here today that you could use in your life to help you be a bit more capable while on night shift. Again, thank you for listening. Please remember to share this with someone who you think could take something out of it. Like the video wherever it is that you're listening. If you're listening on Spotify, please give us a rating. And if you have any questions, feel free to email me them or DM them to me on any of the usual social platforms. Thanks again for joining me today, guys. It's been a pleasure. And remember, as always, get your shift together.